Welcome back to Driven to Extremes. In part 3, we'll continue our look at selecting the right team members to join you on your own expedition. I'm Mac McKenny from Mac's Adventure. We're expedition specialists with 25 years experience of operating vehicles in the most extreme environments on Earth. Joining me is Steve Holland from SJH Projects, who I've worked with for many years now, and organised the team selections for the very first expedition that I ever applied for. So from experience, you could have put someone through the right selection process, they could have passed everything, be highly skilled, great personalities and all the rest of it. But with a vehicle-based expedition, bearing in mind the number of people that like to be in the actual vehicle that you're driving, and also other road users, other members of your team, if there's a convoy of vehicles, if you've got somebody who is a dangerous driver, a careless driver, they don't put their hand up and say they're tired and feel that, it would be losing a bit of faith if they didn't do their shift, and they cause an accident, it could all be very, very serious. So this refers back to the previous video I did, which just touched on the rule of 3. If you have an accident and you're causing something like a catastrophic bleed, big head injury, whatever it is, it could all be over within 3 minutes. So your decision on your team members, same again, worst case scenario, rule of 3. So that could be down to 3 minutes. Now, Steve also briefly touched there on doing one of the exercises in which the driver is blindfolded and you're just kind of navigating around and you think, well, how could that ever be relevant? I'm driving, when would I ever drive blindfolded? Well, when we did the Extreme Driving series for Discovery Channel, we had Mika Salo, the ex-Ferrari racer, and Adrian Brody, the youngest ever Oscar winner. Now, we were in the Malaysian jungle during the rainy season with our 2 big Nissan Patrols and trying to get through this jungle track. And there was a log bridge, a big log bridge with probably a 30 or 40 foot drop below it. And the vehicle had to sort of tiptoe across 2 logs. Now, it was in the dark. We hadn't made camp. We had to keep moving just because it was too dangerous to stay where we were. So I was on my belly in front of the vehicle, shining a torch underneath the vehicle in order to see where the tyres were, both front and rear, as the vehicle made its way across the log bridge. Now, in order for me to be able to see underneath, I didn't want to be blinded by the headlights shining down on me, because that would just completely obliterate my view. So Adrian Brody, I got him to turn the headlights off to allow me to see. And then all of the communication was done via radio, and basically, Adrian was driving completely blind. He couldn't see anything. So there were 2 elements. One, it was complete trust between the 2 of us that I would give him the right commands and he would respond to the right commands exactly as I said them. But the other one was the fact that he was doing it completely blind. And so there was communication and teamwork there. Now, he didn't like it at all. He'd never been through this. He was just literally flown in for the film shoot. But something like an exercise, a blindfold exercise, you could find yourself actually having to do that for real. And I think Steve's got some other examples that he can mention.
Right. The vehicle, it doesn't have to be moving to also be a source of danger. There was a situation up on the Arctic Circle in Sweden where we were testing equipment for the winter crossing, but also running the selection for mechanics. Now, it would normally be minus 20 or so, but it was a particular cold snap, and we had about 8 days consistently of about minus 43, which was cold even for the locals. We had a D6, Caterpillar D6 bulldozer, and the fuel was waxing, filters were an issue, and basically we were having to keep this vehicle running 24 hours a day. And on one particular night, there was going to be a lot of nursing of this vehicle. So we said to the candidate mechanics, okay, you're splitting into pairs, you're going to work in shifts, two of you do the first part of the night, just keeping things running, checking systems, keeping the fuel tank warm, all of that sort of stuff. And then you'll do a swap. You'll come back, the other two will go, and that's fine. And we'll be up early in the morning anyway. Carry on. Came down very early morning for our breakfast, and there were three of the mechanics there. And we were like, whoa, what's going on? And when it came to the second shift, one of them had basically said, look, don't worry about it. I can sort this myself. You just go and get your head down, and we'll be fine. So tried to do a good thing, essentially, but actually became a lone worker around big, heavy mechanical equipment in the dark at minus 43. So if something had happened to him, there was no one there. His life expectancy could have suddenly have been very, very short. Now, the person who was meant to be on duty with him, obvious mistake for coming back, but also the two who were coming off duty, because obviously they met and did a handover, were also complicit. They should not have let that happen. This resulted in, shall we say, a field punishment at minus 43 in front of everyone else, including a BBC news crew, because this was a lesson that had to be driven home. And so we're really just making the point that you don't have to be driving to have an issue or have a dangerous situation. And they really should have thought about this. And the people who allowed this to happen, there were longer term sort of consequences rather than just the immediate driving of the lesson home.
So, well as driving ability and driving safety being an obvious one, what are the other elements that make a vehicle expedition more challenging than, say, a sort of a trekking or a cycling expedition?
You're in a confined space for a long time. You may not be able to swap people around from different vehicles just so they get a fresh break and get to talk to someone else. So you've got perhaps one vehicle that's like a little pressure cooker of people, or a series of individual pressure cookers, and you're together in there for a long time, wearing each other down. As I say, if you get the same stories coming round and round and round, that can not help. Choice of music can be very important. If I was in a vehicle with someone playing jazz, we would probably not get out of the county. And there are situations, not just driving related, but at which you need people to be reliable and behave themselves, like at border crossings and things like that. Someone starts suddenly acting up and joking about even, or whatever, that could seriously mess up your chance of getting through into the next country and ruin your whole trip. And it's the people pulling their weight, taking their turn at the mundane tasks. It's the long-term concentration. Also, there are things that your people who aren't driving, it's not their turn, can be doing and should be doing, which might be on the laptop writing up the blog or the diary and things like that, because you may be being followed by the media in some way and that message needs to get out there. Well, that's the message. If you're just say, well, I'm not driving, I'm just going to sleep and eat, well, you're not necessarily playing your full role in the trip. Because if the vehicle's got from, A to Z, but there's no story being told, that could seriously undermine the point of the whole expedition. So there's always jobs for people to do. Communication between vehicles for anticipating what's coming up, what people are observing, the planning ahead so that when you get to the next stage, whether it's a refuel and eat, or a border crossing or something tricky, that you've anticipated it. You planned for it when you got there, so you don't all then get out of the vehicle, scratch yourself and wander about thinking, oh, what do we do here? Okay, so it's a constant process. It's a constant level of alertness for smoothing the way, but especially for anticipating what could be going wrong at any particular moment.
So when I was due to lead the Bus to Beijing overland expedition from Trafalgar Square all the way to the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing, as Steve has already mentioned, we ran a very big selection course for all these bus drivers. Now, once you're leaving Western Europe, particularly the EU, you're into a lot of border crossings, and so one of the exercises is a pretty high pressure border point, and this you'll come across for us in the West, seeing multiple military with armored vehicles and all the rest of it. You just don't see it at borders. But you start heading out into the Stans, you go down to Africa, it's very common. And the border guards there, it's not a high level posting. You've probably been sent there because you're not very good at your job. You're stuck out in some remote location, hour after hour, nothing to do. So when vehicles do turn up, it just gives you the opportunity to, you know, entertain yourself for an hour. And you can be the big man as these Westerners or whatever turn up in their shiny vehicles. So one of the exercises on the Beijing thing was that we had a load of guys there, all fully armed. We had people pressed up against the walls, and there was a lot of pressure to get these people through the border. So I'm sure Steve would like to explain a little bit more detail about how some of the bus drivers reacted to the presence of all these military sort of pushing them around and trying to segregate the team up.
We had, say, 36 candidates. We split them up into teams of 6, and they had sort of an ongoing round robin of exercises. We needed, for the bus to Beijing, 12 candidates. There would be 4 that went, I think, basically as far as Uzbekistan. Then it would change to 4 who would complete the journey, and then 4 sort of reserves. The makeup of those groups of teams did periodically change. And come this very early hours of Sunday morning, we were having an idea. We'd have get-togethers, and we'd formed an idea of maybe who our top 12 were. So they, without their knowledge, were moved into 2 teams of 6, to which extra pressure would be applied just to test them that bit harder. And at this mock checkpoint with the guys with the big furry hats and the AK-47s and the guys who we were working with who do the hostile environment training for some of the media and things were very good. They really were into character and were, quite scary in their own way. Pulled out one of these teams. Now, in this vehicle, there was a copy of the Sun newspaper. Well, that turned out in our scenario to be sort of contraband and banned in this particular country. So they were out the vehicle, up against the side. It was a railway crossing bridge, wasn't it? I think, and they were arms against the wall. Now, one of our strong candidates was a girl, large girl, really good personality, was perhaps one of our front runners. And partway through this, obviously as a sort of way to try and burst the situation or sort of break the tension, decided to pretend that she was pregnant. She was large, that was possible, but going into labour. Now, I was standing on the verge with one of the staff from this other company we were working with, and we just sort of looked at each other and thought, well, this will be interesting. The guys who were actually acting the scenario out took a pause because this was new to them, and then went with it. But the going with it then turned into, okay, we'll take you to our village where we have a doctor, and all of this, which is then like, what are you doing? You are now risking splitting up your team, which is the last thing you want. Her fellow 5 other team members in the vehicle with her, the look on their faces was like, what are you doing? But they could say nothing, but their look was just despair. And unfortunately, that's where she blew what was, a shoe-in for a place. But again, you need to let these things run so people get tired, so that these traits or possibilities can expose themselves. And I don't think she would have done something like that on the first morning. It's only at the end when they're worn out and you apply a bit more pressure that this sort of thing, exposes itself. But it was an entertaining moment. Shame no one was filming it.
Yeah, I remember it well. It was great fun to watch. Haven't experienced anything like it before or since, and luckily, having arrived at many borders in the world, none of my team members have opted to attempt that one either. So, having put all the potential candidates through this grueling physical and mental exercise, how do you make the final decision as to who you think should be suitable for heading off on the actual expedition itself?
Well, obviously, if you're after a single discipline, like you're just after mechanics, it's a bit simpler because there's so many positions available and there's your pool of candidates. But oftentimes it's a bit of a mix. You've got multiple roles to fill. So obviously, if you need a cook, a cameraman, etc., there's no point picking 4 mechanics. So a little bit of division. But then the first thing we work on is when we're running this, I'm usually running the show along with yourself, although I'm usually more the bad cop, shall we say. But candidates do sharpen up a little bit if I'm around or you're around. However, when we are not directly there, but others of our selection team, including children and whatever, they can let their guard down a bit, or perhaps say things in chats that get overheard because they're less on guard. So we all see different things, and it's very interesting then when we get together around the table, having waved off the candidates, we sit around. The first thing that we do before we discuss them in any way is just give a straight 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 scoring from each person on the selection team for each candidate. You're not allowed to give any qualification statements or anything at that stage. It's just a straight raw scoring. Now, oftentimes it's very good to see how consistent they are. Sometimes someone could score well, middle, nil, and go, and then get a complete, I'd give this person 0 if I could. When you think, we'll come back to that. Having got the raw score, you will then have some people who've done well, who are obviously then considered amongst your stronger candidates. Some people who've done universally badly, who then really don't need that much more discussion. And then some in the middle who could go either way. The business of someone scoring well, but someone against the trend giving them a really low score, that'll be one of the first things you look into. And then they may have done something, said something, acted in some way when they thought no one was looking, where you just think, wow, no, bad luck, mate, you're not going anywhere. And this is the benefit of this multiple pairs of eyes. And then you start a bit more of an open discussion, but focusing on the sort of top end of the field, who are the stronger candidates. And then you wheedle them out and say, different people see different things, and you have a more of a focus roundtable discussion. But usually the consensus is pretty much there by the end of it. And then you are making a recommendation. You're not ultimately choosing. It's the expedition leader. It's their ultimate choice. You are just providing a recommendation to them. Now, we have had it on multiple occasions where those recommendations have gone forward. Someone who might be quite skilled at some, a particular function has done really badly on all the sort of personality traits and would you want to live with this person and all the rest of it. And they've been selected anyway. Because it's like, they're really good at so-and-so and I had a good feeling about them. And on the few occasions where that's happened, we've usually been proved right. because out in the field, they have proved to be an utter nightmare. Um, and it happens. You can train skills. You can find other people with skills. You can't really train someone's personality or whole nature. But say that's the essential thing: a raw score first off, which can throw up a few surprises, and then a focused discussion. But if over the whole process, the cream rises to the top, sometimes not until right near the end, and people tend to end up sort of selecting themselves because you created the scenario in which that can happen. So having got down to your preferred candidates, actually one thing that's important to do before you tell anyone they passed or failed is bring them in one by one. I remember doing this in the middle of the North Sea with Ran, where again I was made to be the baddie, to find out that having gone through a simulated mini expedition experience with all the appropriate activities and pressures, find out whether they still want to do it. It might have been an idea they were really up for, and they might have been a natural at it. But having tried it, they might think, you know what, I really don't fancy doing this sort of thing for 3 months. It's harder or it's different to what I thought it would be. So let some of these people, step out of it themselves before you then announce, because you don't want to find out that for this one particular slot that you've already told the person who came second that, sorry, you didn't make it. Then you go to the person who came first in your eyes, said, great, you got the job. And then they say, oh, actually, you know what? I don't really want to do it. And then you have the issue of going back to the person who was second and saying, we said no, well, we'd like to say yes. That's not the way to start off a good long-term relationship. So it's really just a bit of a trick of the trade that is worth considering for smoothing the wheels. People don't need to know that they were necessarily the second choice. They just need to know they were successful, and off they go. And if they head off into the sunset with you thinking they were the first choice, that suits everyone.
Probably going to be many of you now watching this thinking, crikey, I want to put a team together. I've got a big project planned. It doesn't have to be just a small couple of mates heading off to the first remote area. You might have a round the world trip planned. You might have some endurance event planned. It might be a big project. So, Steve, do you provide this selection process as a service to other teams if they want to give you a call?
We do, as I say, we have myself and the other people we tend to use. We have day jobs. It's really a matter of we do it periodically for those who we sort of think, yeah, that's a worthwhile venture. We'd like to actually put the time and effort in to support that. And it can be done at different scales as well, depending upon what you're looking to do, how many people. We can sort of scale it up and down. What the candidates tend not to realize is it's actually way more tiring for us than it is for them, because while they're sleeping, we're actually still running around prepping for the next bits, or we're up discussing where we're at with progress so far, and it's all happening behind the scenes. But if anything, it's easier to be a candidate on the selection than it is running it. So it's not something I want to do every weekend. But they're good fun. It pulls us together. It's an opportunity to meet up and do something interesting and worthwhile. And it's a proven formula now. We've done it quite a lot of times, and we've got a good selection of group pictures of happy customers, if you like. And that sort of skill or experience, or whatever you want to call it, is available to help other people.
That was brilliant, Steve. Can't thank you enough for joining us in this video. So if you have any questions, and I'm sure there are many are going to come out of this very insightful video, please do leave them any comments in the description box below. hopefully you've taken away something regarding the team that you've either already chosen to go with you, whether they're the right characters for undertaking such an adventure, or whether you're trying to bring in new team members to join you on your trip. So thanks again to Steve, and look forward to seeing you next time.